I was going to say a lot of kangaroo courts out there. Kangaroo court. This sounds like a zebra court. Sound like a zebra court.
Hello and welcome to the Attorney Post, where we give you the inside scoop with top attorneys in their field. And now, here's our host, Justin West.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Attorney Post, where we discuss what's going on in various facets of the law with lawyers at the top of their game to help you navigate the ins and outs of various legal fields and jurisdictions. Because, as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Today, we're actually going to be doing something slightly different. We have Judge Randy Rich, who now serves as a mediator with Henning Mediation down in, I believe, Atlanta, Georgia, if I'm not mistaken. And he's going to weigh in on a lot of his life experiences as his experience in law, his experience as a judge, his experience as a mediator. So we're going to get kind of a different take on the law than we often get today. Judge Rich, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I appreciate you having me on. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Well, before we begin, as always, we're going to jump over and take a look at your site. This is henningmediation.com. As always, we will have a link down below, henningmediation.com. Henning Mediation and Arbitration Services offers experienced and professional dispute resolution services, specializing in mediation arbitration for a wide range of legal matters, including personal injury, business disputes, and complex litigation. Their team of seasoned neutrals, led by highly respected professionals like Judge Randy Rich, provides clients with effective and efficient solutions to resolve conflicts outside of court. So we're going to be diving into mediation, arbitration, and all the things that they do today. But again, you can reach them at henningmediation.com or by calling 770-955-2252. That's 770-955-2252. Before we get started, we are going to jump over and read from our sponsors. Our first sponsor today is Habanero Social. This episode is brought to you by Habanero Social. What if Google could send you free clients or customers every single month? Well, they do that for lots of people all the time. With Habanero Social, it's not just a fantasy, it's a reality. Their AI-powered platform optimizes your Google business profile to attract more local customers effortlessly. From cranking out high-quality content to managing reviews and fine-tuning your local SEO, Habanero Social handles it all while you sit back and watch your business grow. 85% of searches happen within the Google Maps pack if it's a local search, and they don't ever leave it. So the place you need to be to capture those clients is that map pack. An optimized Google business profile doesn't just show up, it engages, it builds trust, increases clicks, and ultimately boosts your business. And we're so confident that it works, they will offer a 3 times ROI guarantee on the engagement, meaning you will make more than you spend with them, or they'll pay you back. Stop wasting your time on old school tactics. Habanero Social automates everything that you need in order to rank higher, engage better, and drive more clients to your business. Ready to reach more clients? Visit habanerosocial.com and let AI do the heavy lifting today. Our second sponsor is Andropology, is another new one that we had recently added. Gentlemen, if you are looking to take charge of your health and feel better, listen up. Whether it's managing type 2 diabetes, boosting your testosterone levels, or just wanting to increase your overall longevity later in life, Andropology has got you covered. They deep dive into natural solutions from superfoods like spirulina and tart cherry extract to targeted fitness routines like HIIT, which is high intensity interval training, that can help you reclaim your energy and your vitality. At Andropology, it's all about practical, science-based advice tailored specifically for men who want to improve their health without the fluff. Think of it as your go-to guide for navigating the complexities of men's health simplified. From diet tips to supplement recommendations, they have everything you need to start making positive changes today. Visit andropology.com to explore the latest insights on living a healthier, more vibrant life. That's andropology.com, where better health begins. Alrighty, so we are joined with Judge Randy Rich. Judge Rich is a seasoned mediator with over 300 jury trials under his belt, including overseeing Georgia's largest civil lawsuit, which is the Georgia opioid litigation. Having served as a judge in both the Gwinnett County and Metro Atlanta business courts, he's played pivotal roles in the establishment of the the Gwinnett Business Court. His vast experience spans civil, criminal, and business law, making him a go-to neutral for complex legal disputes. Judge Rich's mediation style is lauded for its fairness, professionalism, and a calm but determined approach that puts clients at ease while guiding them towards mediated resolutions. He has received widespread praise from both plaintiffs and defendants for his expertise, compassion, and follow-through in mediation. Now serving as a full-time neutral at Henning Mediation, he continues to resolve cases across a wide range of industries, including aviation, personal injury, and business disputes. That was a mouthful to say, and I don't think it barely even scratches the surface of what you do. So my first question to you, Judge, is what did I miss?
Well, I think you got basically everything. One thing that I think makes me slightly different from other folks is I used to teach law school, and I did that I guess for about I don't know 15 years. Sometimes trying to explain a legal concept to somebody that's not a lawyer, but because this is going to help the case settle, for example, it helps, I think, to be able to put it in really simple terms to, help the folks understand, what the legal words mean when they, don't have a legal background.
No, that makes perfect sense. I mean, it really is important to be able to break down concepts in a way that anybody can understand them. I teach my kids this all the time. I say that the number one lesson you can learn in school, it's not, who won this battle or war, how does the quadratic equation function? It's how do you communicate with people? Because if you can communicate with people, you can do anything, right? There's that adage, it's kind of tongue in cheek, those who can do, those who can't teach. But I think that that's absolutely a misnomer, right? Because if you can really teach well, if you can communicate ideas and get people to understand things, that's huge. So the fact that you did that and are able to break down complex legal ideas for anybody, lawyers or non-lawyers, jurors, etc., that's huge. Absolutely. So you taught law, you've been a judge. I guess the first question I have to ask is why law? Did you grow up watching Perry Mason and you're just like, this is what I want to do? Was this a midlife crisis that just led you into law, or early midlife crisis? What led you into doing law and what led you down your trajectory of becoming a judge and then a mediator?
Well, I guess it's a little bit of a story. We were,
We've got time. It's a podcast, so
well, we were, this is me and my college roommates. And I went to high school with a lot of these guys too. And we're all getting ready to graduate, and it's 1988. Um, and we're trying to figure out what we're going to do, and we're all political science majors. And so, they don't come beating your door down to say, "Hey, I hope you got a political science degree because we're ready to hire you." And so, we're all just trying to explore what could we possibly do with this degree. And
I was a political science minor, and I had my majors in philosophy and history. I always joke I can ask the deep questions in life, like you want paper or plastic, or you want fries with that, right? So I understand the challenge of a political science degree. I dropped down to a minor when I already was like halfway there. I'm like, oh, this is not what I want to do with my life. Anyway, continue. I'm sorry, but I just had to share that thought.
yeah, yeah, you're exactly right. And it's such a common degree. My wife, my wife and I are both lawyers now. But she was the same thing, political science degree. And when when we were at that final year, I think she had known she wanted to go to law school, but me and my roommates, we didn't. So a couple of us just decided to take the LSAT and kind of on a whim, see how we do. And I did okay, so I went ahead and went to law school.
Nice. And then from law school, that led you into eventually practice or teaching, or what was the trajectory there?
Yeah, I guess I don't know why it didn't turn on when I was in college, but I made decent grades in college, A's and B's, and when I got into law school though, it's like the subject matter, it just I grasped it all, pretty quickly. So I was really kind of a star student in law school, graduated near the top of the class, and I was just involved in a lot of different organizations in law school. But then when it was time to get out of law school, this is now 1992, we had the first Bush recession, way back when.
Mhm.
And me and my buddy from law school, his name was Mike Smith, we like looking at each other, what are we going to do now? Because nobody's hiring. So he had done the same thing, grew up in Gwinnett County, and we met at law school, and we just decided we'd go out and have a firm with just the two of us. And so we called it Rich and Smith, and we just started taking cases. And I always loved the courtroom side of the cases, in terms of what's going to happen in the courtroom. That was kind of what I focused on. And he focused more on the probate side of the court cases where you try to, resolve a will dispute or write up wills for folks. And he was more interested in that side of the law. And we stayed together, I think, for 12 years or so, and just had a blast being lawyers. And then I decided, along with a couple other folks at that time, this was now 2004. One of our judges, a really respected guy, Howard Cook, he decided to retire back in 2004. And so a lot of the local lawyers, like myself included, decided to run for that seat. So I think there were five lawyers and two or three magistrate judges put in for the race. So it was I think it was a 7-man or election, and I ended up getting into a runoff, and then ended up winning the runoff, and that was really an exciting time for me. I just had one child, and one more was born that same election year, and just this kind of the start of my judicial career as well as being a dad. So both of those things took a little bit of getting used to.
Nice. I remember hearing about I think it was back in the 2016 or 2020 election, all the Georgia runoff elections. I'd never even heard of a runoff election before, and I guess that's a very common thing down there. Like that's just a function of your elections, which is fascinating. So you sat in, you were a judge, and you did that for how long? And then what made you switch to mediation? Did you just get tired of sitting on cases?
Well, you can see the gray hair, I guess, that comes along with being a judge.
There's a simple solution to that. It's called buzz it all off. Although it's still gray down here. So,
I thought you were going to say simple solution is a chemical you can put on your hair and it makes it turn.
okay, there's a couple of simple solutions. One of them is buzz it all off.
Um, well, I guess the teaching part too. I never really went into
Oh
detail
yeah.
on that, but I started teaching right after I got out of law school. I just was so, I guess, in that mode of wanting to help law students, and I started coaching trial teams there at the law school, and ended up teaching, down the road for years. But the teaching part of my career, I used to teach at Georgia State Law School, but as soon as I became elected judge, I was surprised to learn, I didn't know, that you can't teach at a state-funded law school and be a state judge of record in a state court, the judicial branch at the same time.
Hmm.
It's like a constitutional prohibition on it. So I ended up switching law schools to a private law school in Atlanta. Um, but I ended up still teaching there for years. And I was a state court judge. Remember, I was telling you about Judge Cook retiring. He was a state court judge, and I was a state court judge from 2004 to 2014, I believe. Um, anyway, it's somewhere in that time period, I put in and applied to be appointed to be a Superior Court judge, and I was selected to be a Superior Court judge, and I served in that role until 2020. And then I've been in Henning ever since, and just I feel like it's a lot less stressful, than going to the courtroom every day, as you can imagine. But my gray hair is here, so not much I can do about the gray hair.
Other than the aforementioned solutions. Uh, so you started working with Henning. How long have you been there?
Since 2020, and
2020?
yeah, and they've been around forever. They were I think, one of the very first major arbitration mediation firms in Atlanta. Founded just years ago, in the 90s, sometime maybe it's 80 something. And they
Website says 25th anniversary, so at least 25 years.
Yeah, yeah, and they were just kind of the front runners of the mediation world. And when I was going to law school, they just taught you how to go to court and try a case and hopefully win. But now you go to law school, they're like, well, you're not going to go to court and win ordinarily. 99% of the cases they settle at mediation.
Yeah,
So it's just a whole different way of thinking about the likelihood that your case is never going to see a courtroom.
gotcha. So, and I usually ask this question first, but I jumped right into your history because I was just really kind of fascinated by it. If I were to ask you to give me a pitch for Henning, why do people choose to work with Henning? Why do people come to you? What services do you provide? Who are your ideal clients? Give me your elevator pitch if you would. I'd love to know more about. I'd like my listeners to know more about who should be contacting you. How would they know if they need you?
Well, most of the time, the folks that call Henning are going to be lawyers that that know you from, maybe they had a case in front of you, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and they thought, well, this might be a good mediator. My personality, I guess, is the main thing for me that sets me what I think is apart from a lot of folks, which is I can talk to anybody about any subject at any time, and I'm going to be comfortable. And if you need to talk to me, just because you want to tell somebody I guess the parts of your case that you don't want, necessarily to tell a judge or a jury down the road, but you want to tell somebody,
Mhm.
uh, I'm going to sit there and listen to you for as long as it need be, and then I'm going to let you know that I heard you. Um, but most of the time it's going to be lawyers that call. Litigants, sometimes call their lawyers and say, "Hey, I remember that judge that did my first divorce. I want him on my second divorce too, if he's still around." And so sometimes it's parties, but oftentimes it's just lawyers that know you and know your reputation, and they choose you for that particular kind of case, based on something about the case. And it may be that the person needs to be educated a little bit on what the law is, because maybe they see the case as black and white, and really it's really, really, really gray. So that it's usually attorneys that make the call to pick a certain mediator. And I think Henning, they've been around so long, they're sort of like that. They have this in an ad somewhere. It's like they call themselves the gold standard of
Yeah.
mediation firms in Atlanta, and they really are. Anybody that says the name Henning, they know what you're talking about, and they know the kind of the quality mediators you're going to get there.
Gotcha. Okay. No, that makes perfect sense. So let's go back for a little bit to your experience in law. In the intro, I read a couple things that I just want to know more about. And you've sat on over 300 jury trials, is that right? What what is the thread that you've noticed sitting on those? Like you have to pick up on certain insights, like oh, here comes another jury trial, and it's going to be blank. Like, what are the big commonalities? What's the most fascinating part about that position? Because 99.999% of people will never get a chance to do that.
Yeah, I know, and I never got to be selected as a juror either. One
Yeah.
time, my wife and I both got called in, same day. We're like, well, one
hmm
of us would get picked, but we're both lawyers, so we knew we probably wouldn't get picked after
It's
all. But
actually a question I ask attorneys all the time is have you ever sat on a jury? Because I feel like that would be an important thing for an attorney to experience. I talk with a lot of PI attorneys and they'll say, well, we will do mock trials all the time. We'll do, samples. So it's kind of like the same thing where you're experiencing it from their perspective, but it's never quite the same thing. It's always fascinating because a lot of times as soon as they hear you're a juror, you're an attorney, they're like, I don't want him. He'll steer everyone. He'll become the foreman and he'll steer things. And if I say something wrong, he'll know that I said something wrong and he'll carry it against me. So I assume that's the reason why. I've been called for jury duty twice. I've never actually had a chance to serve as well. But one time sorry, it's a funny aside story. I came back from our Christmas vacation. We're married. We have 5 kids. My wife is from Pennsylvania, so we'll drive out there, a couple times a year to go visit family. I came back and found a notice on my door that I was in contempt of court. Like, what is this? And apparently, we were gone for 2 weeks, and like probably like the day or two before we left, it must have gone out, and it probably arrived the day that we left, and it sat there for 2 weeks, and I never showed up, and so because I never showed up, I was in contempt of court. I went and explained it, and everything was fine. But yeah, so I've never had a chance to sit on jury either, but I do find the concept fascinating. You're doing your civic duty. So anyway, you were saying, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Well, I did mean to interrupt, but it's what we do
well,
in a conversation. So
it's not every day you get to meet somebody who's almost been held in contempt. So
yeah,
that's you.
near contempt.
No, I'm just teasing. Well, the jury cases that I remember, in terms of trends and all that sort of thing, half the caseload was criminal docket, and the other half was a civil docket, which is lawsuits. Usually, it's about money, sometimes real estate. Um, but so the criminal cases, the thing you always, that stood out was that the jurors don't necessarily readily and easily believe the police officers for whatever reason. There's just a suspicion there, and they want to make sure, and they want a video, and they want pictures, and they want photographs of the crime scene, the way the man said it looked. And so there's just all that surprised me a little bit, because when I was coming along, the police were everything they said was the truth. And I guess we see so many times um, in the news that police do things for different reasons, and it's not always the truth. So that's the thing on the criminal side. But on the civil side, especially around the time of COVID, you could just see jurors looking at a case that used to be, what's the value of this man's life for the next 20 years? Well, it used to be before COVID, they would say, well, probably going to be retired, probably going to be doing this, probably going to be doing that. But after COVID, every day was so much more valuable to a juror. The jury verdicts and the awards just went up dramatically, because the value of life is something that people had never really thought about, I think, until they saw, themselves in their own circumstances. What if I'm locked up for, a year at a time, with the COVID lockdowns or whatever it might have been.
Huh.
So I think the jury evaluation of the value of a case really went up starting, in the COVID years.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I've never heard anyone actually make that claim before and tie it into everyone's experience during the pandemic and how it would have shifted people's view of the value of a year of their life. That is really kind of a neat thing to see. I've never encountered that. So you also were involved in the Georgia opioid litigation. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I can't talk too much about specific cases like that, but
Okay.
that was just a giant mammoth case, and it was all over the news for a while, and they ended up settling the case after I left the bench. But
Gotcha.
I think every state, if my recollection's right, every state has settled, and then with one of the companies, one of the big opioid companies, went into bankruptcy, and they tried to make a certain amount of money of a payment to the victims before they went into bankruptcy, and I think they called that back and made them pay more money. The Sackler family was the family I'm talking about. Um, anyway, everything ended up getting resolved, but those kind of cases are just they were so much fun for me because I think there were maybe 20 different parties with 20 different sets of lawyers, and it was, it's just when you're in something meaningful and complex like that with some of the best lawyers around, it just makes your job as a judge so much easier. That's why I really enjoyed those, higher, um I guess higher tech cases, higher intensity.
Gotcha. Oh, that's fascinating. Excuse me. I might sneeze. Hang on.
Bless you though.
Well, thank you either way. I think it's going away. So it's right there on the nose. I was like, oh, I'm gonna hit the mute button if it happens. That's all right. Okay, so all right, we'll shift a little bit. You've been practicing law for a good long while in some capacity or another. You've been teaching law. You've been a judge. You're a mediator now. You've done the whole gamut, really. I am sure in your experience, you have had some amazing successes and also probably some setbacks. Now, I'm a firm believer, as my listeners know, that a failure is only a failure if you don't learn from it. And sometimes failure is the best teacher, right? So as long as you learn from it, it's really a slow burn win. So, Judge, can you let my listeners know about a time in your career where you experienced, and I don't, whatever aspect of your career makes the most sense, where you experienced what you would consider failure? Maybe things didn't go the right way. Maybe you totally forgot to do something, somebody else totally forgot something that they said they were going to do and they didn't, whatever it happens to be. But what did you learn from that? How do you carry that forward to make yourself better, whether it's, when you were acting as a judge or in your mediation now, if that makes sense?
Yeah, sure. Well, a lot of my what you might call failures were really I guess efforts that I had to get appointed the next judgeship, for example. I wanted, I told you I went from this court to that court. I wanted to go to the next court. And so all of those processes, always very political, and I didn't always make the right decisions in terms of when to seek a certain spot versus, somebody else was going to have that spot that particular time, and so I failed a lot. I mean, I probably put in for judge jobs probably 11 or 12 times, before I was ever selected for that first, selection that I was telling you about earlier. And so it's just every time you go through that kind of process, you learn a little something, and hopefully don't make the same mistake, the next time that you apply and that kind of thing. Um, and that's probably the one thing I regret the most. I really, in terms of the career highlights or whatever you might want to call it, when I was the first elected judge back in 2004 out of the 7 candidates, and I was the youngest guy, and I had, no judicial experience, and a couple of the guys did. I felt like I had really accomplished something, and what was, I guess, the most meaningful, it was my community where I grew up. I don't know if I mentioned that, but when me and the guy from law school were talking about going back to Gwinnett County, that's where we both grew up, and we just felt like, hey, we're going back home, we're gonna like be country lawyers. Back then it was still a little bit country anyway. And so we would take wills, and somebody got a divorce, somebody fell off a roof, somebody's kid got a DUI. We just helped everybody that walked in our door.
Right. A lawyer of all trades,
Yeah.
of all facets. Well, it sounds like you learned tenacity as well. If you're going to have to, keep putting yourself out there and going after this position. I mean, many people would give up after the first no. But you didn't. And now I get to call you Judge Rich. So, I guess it worked out pretty well in the end. So the flip side of that coin obviously is success. I'm sure you've had some moments in your career that you're just incredibly proud of. Maybe as you're falling asleep at night, laying your head on your pillow, and you just think back, you're like, man, I'm so glad that happened that way. You relive those moments. What's one or two of those moments in your career, Judge, that you just really um, are really proud of? What are the proverbial feathers in your cap, so to speak?
Well, it's again, I can't talk about any specific cases, but I had the opportunity when I was on the Superior Court, and then even when I was on the state court, to be asked to sit in for this program that Governor Deal started all over the state of Georgia called drug courts, and they're basically accountability courts for folks that, for whatever reason, they can't manage a normal court sentence, because they're addicted to drugs usually, and so you fight with the drugs to try to get them off the drugs, and they're going to get in trouble along the way too. And so there might be a person that gets in that program, and it's you're hand selected. It's not that you can just apply and you're accepted. You're hand selected based on your chance of success. And so in that drug court opportunity that I had, it'd be, you'd be sitting in the courtroom on a Friday morning is when I did mine, and five new people come in, but probably two or three of them are going to fail out. They just can't make it. Even with the extra accountability, they can't make it. And so 2 years later, when those two or three folks that you saw 5 years, not 5 years, but 2 or 3 years earlier, you saw those people come in and you didn't know if they were going to make it or not. And you could just see how much they put into the program and
Yeah.
how much the accountability courts help them achieve sobriety first, and then get through the court sentence part two. It's just very, very rewarding. That was the most rewarding thing I did when I was a judge, is try to celebrate those folks' success, and just very, very meaningful.
That's awesome. I could definitely see that. I mean, it's almost like watching somebody get their life back, right? In a real sense. And I've known a number of people that have been touched very negatively by those sorts of issues. And it's heartbreaking when you see it, but I guess it really is. It has to be so rewarding to see them, I guess, come full circle, come back to the light, so to speak. That's awesome. Um, so here's a random question again. I understand that you can only say so much, but in my experience, attorneys especially, they deal with a lot of just absurdities in their life. I have to assume as a judge, you probably have dealt with some absolutely crazy absurdities. I've had attorneys tell me they had guns pulled on them in court. I've had attorneys tell me, clients bring them the most absurd cases that they thought there's no way this would ever, happen. And I don't, absurdity means different things to different people, but I am sure in your experience, you've encountered one or two things that were just baffling, absurd. And like, how did this come to this, right? So what's one or two of the things that you've encountered, Judge, that you would consider to be the most absurd things you've encountered in your practice of law?
Well, when I was a judge, the most crazy, absurd kind of things that would happen would be some of the obscenities that some of these witnesses would say on the witness stand in a courtroom, with the jury sitting there, and it was just crazy stuff. I don't want to repeat any of them, I hope you understand that part. But
That's fine.
when I was a lawyer, it was a very similar kind of thing where I remember this one case, and I tell the story a lot. The lady, it was a custody case, and she was trying to keep custody of her children, and the DFACS folks were trying to take her children away from her. And I want to say she had two or three kids. And one of the reasons that they wanted to take the kids away was because she would frequently go to bars every weekend and sit out, hang out at the bars while the kids were being watched by a neighbor or something. And so one time she was stopped, for drinking and driving. And so the attorney there was trying to ask the lady, basically, what did you blow on your test? What was your test results from your arrest? And the lady was trying not to answer. And so one of the things that, the lawyer's just trying to walk through was, so did you take a breath test? No, I didn't take a breath test. Well, did you take a urine test? I don't know what urine is. I don't know. And the lawyer's like, a urine test, where they test your urine. And the lady's like, oh, a pee test. I did take a pee test. They have not had the results back on the pee test. And that's just a funny story I remember from back when I was an attorney, and that was my client. It did not get the test back.
Okay. I mean, that's funny. I like that. Uh, it is funny you mentioned the profanity. I think it was Sigmund Freud who said, it's my philosophy and history coming out, right? He said civility is or no, yeah, civility is the glue of society. And I sometimes I'm really taken aback at how crass we can be as a culture and how we've really just kind of normalized and accepted it. Like when I found myself in contempt of court, I had to go in and I was overhearing like a series of dockets. I don't even know what it was. My actual legal knowledge is low for hosting a bunch of stuff for attorneys. My actual knowledge of the legal proceedings was low, but there was a bunch of people appearing before the judge and entering claims or whatever it was. And there was definitely a guy that showed up. And he wasn't profane in his talk, but he was dressed literally in one of those pajama bodysuits that looked like a donkey with like a hood that was the head and he had a tail and everything. He just walked into court dressed like that and went up and did his thing and then went on with his life. And I'm just like, I can't fathom doing that. Like I would have to assume that that's going to hurt my chances at whatever outcome I want. But I guess for some people, they just don't care or they don't think it through. Or, I mean, I don't know his story. Maybe he literally just lost everything that he owned, and that's the only thing he had left. And he's like, well, I got to go to court, so it's better this than the alternative, right? I don't know, and I'm not trying to judge, but it's fascinating to see sometimes how we as a culture have changed and what would have been acceptable even 30 years ago versus, what passes as acceptable today. And I'm not here to talk about the dang kids and their television and their dance and everything, but
Well, I was going to say a lot of kangaroo courts out there. Kangaroo court. This sounds like a zebra court. Sound like a zebra court.
Well, if the whole mediation thing doesn't ever work out, I know Saturday Night Live is looking for people that can play President Trump. I think you could do it. I'm just saying we get this blonde and get you the blue suit and the red tie. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm liking it. They already got the power tie, so I think you're like two-thirds there, man.
Well, it's funny, no matter what, either if you're a Republican or you're a Democrat, either one, you both can laugh at Donald Trump, I think,
Yes. And that is the benefit of him. I really think, and I'm not going to go into politics on this. I keep politics. You're welcome to be as political as you want. I try to keep politics out of what I do. But I do appreciate about the man is both sides can laugh at him. And I think that that's a good thing. I think that it in a already politically charged environment where there's a lot of intense gravity, a little bit of levity goes a long way towards bringing down tempers. And I think if we can just poke fun at politicians more frequently, we'll all be better off.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I agree with you so much, and I try to poke fun on both sides. So no matter which
Absolutely.
no matter which politician is stupid that day, I try to.
They're all worth being poked fun at, really, right?
Right, yeah.
So let's talk about mediation. People come into your office, they need a mediator, and I'm sure they come in with misconceptions about who you are and what it is you do and can do for them. What's one of the biggest misconceptions, Judge, that somebody brings into your office?
Well, the mediation, like I said, generally it's going to be the lawyer that calls, and they may call you ahead of time and say this is going to be a really, really, really tough case, and here's why. My client is this, my client's family is that, and my client can't understand this, and my client thinks that, and so they might give you a little bit of a background on what's going to make the case more difficult to settle. But every case, unfortunately, comes down to usually it's dollars and cents. So some amount of money is going to settle the case, and some other amount of money is not going to settle the case. And I mentioned to you earlier about the the client wanting to be heard sometimes, and that's something that every mediator should do. But there are folks that call that think you can settle the impossible case, where one side's at $10 million for a car wreck, or let's say, and the other side is at $1,000 because the person really wasn't that hurt. So sometimes some cases, some are impossible to settle, and you just have to you have to be willing to live with that too. But not every case can be settled by any mediator.
What happens when a case doesn't settle?
Well,
Both when they leave your office, like, do you chalk that up as a loss on your end? You're just like, this just wasn't going to happen. And then going forward, does that mean it's going to go to trial and whatnot?
Well, yeah, and that 90% of the cases do settle. So I'm not trying to minimize the amount of settlement, but But the dialogue that we have during the mediation, it may not result in settlement every time that day,
Hmm.
but just that dialogue alone, the people have already thought about settling for a couple of hours, and now the dialogue is like not that we're going to court anymore, it's that we're going to settle. And so just the dialogue helps the cases sometimes settle a week later, or 2 weeks later, or a month later. Um, and then if you can't settle that case, you don't take it as a loss. You look at it as the start of a dialogue about settling that case.
Gotcha. Um, I had another question I was going to ask. It was related to that, and I just lost it. The train went off the tracks for a minute there. Um, oh, what was it? It was totally related to what you were just saying. It'll come to me, and if it doesn't, then so be it. We'll move on. Um, what are the types of cases you generally mediate? When people come to you, when an attorney comes to you, I mean, is it just all ranges? I mean, obviously personal injuries, some of it. What are the breadth and the span of what types of things get mediated?
Well, I think in my particular case, like let's say I was never a judge and I was just a real estate lawyer and I was doing mediations now. I think everybody would call me for real estate cases. You know what I mean? Because that was what I had the most experience in. But when after I had the 16 years as a judge, I did a little bit of every kind of case out there. So like for example, if you're a lawyer and you call me because you remember a contract case I did 5 years ago and it was meaningful in some way, you're going to call me about that one. And then the next lawyer down the calendar, he might have had a real estate case that, he's going to call about. And the next guy might be a trucking case. It just all depends on what kind of experience you had with me and what kind of, your impressions were of that case. I think it kind of sets me apart a little bit. It's not just that I had a practice that focused on such and such for 20 years. I saw a little bit of everything for, 25 years.
Gotcha. Do you think your time serving as a judge also influences how you mediate cases?
I do, and it's a lot of it, is just patience, the mediation process. I don't know if you've ever been through one, but I mean, it is tedious
I
sometimes.
fortunately have not, but
Well, you sit there for just hours and hours and hours and very, very little movement sometimes. And so the patience part is something that I've got to really condition folks that have never done it before to really just give the process patience because when you sit there and think, well, I've got a number in my head and they're going to pay that number, but they will, but they won't do it until 3 or 4 hours later. That's you got to be very patient about letting that process happen.
um, how do you deal with I don't want to say this. I'm sure that there's really tough emotional situations that you come in contact with all the time. Maybe even like severely emotionally damaging content. Maybe things that I don't know if you've ever dealt with things that would involve, the harming of children or something like that. How do you handle that? How do you particularly parse that out so it doesn't affect you personally? And how do you remain fair and balanced as a mediator, trying to still work with both sides and be as fair and unbiased as you can be?
Well, I guess the judge part of that is, the being neutral. That's just kind of where you always try to be. I'm very used to that part of it. But you're right. There are some bad facts. Some child got abused at a daycare center, and you've got to try to give that parent of that child an amount of money that will make the case settle. And sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. But that child is still going to live with all that trauma for all that amount of time. And then you're still going to be trying to dialogue with the child and a parent about all that trauma, trying to get to a resolution of potentially, what it could be that would settle that case. So it's very, very tough. But I think the training as a judge being, leaning toward being neutral, not leaning toward being an advocate, one side or the other. That's part of it. And of course, the other part is if you've got a bad set of facts like that, that's the case you definitely have to settle, because you don't want a jury ever getting a hold of a case like that with really, really, really bad facts that could, make an enormous verdict, against you.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Um, what do you do in a situation when you're mediating, but one of the parties is just uncooperative or unwilling to negotiate? I mean, is there a process for wearing them down or getting them to understand why they need to be here? Or is this, that 10% that doesn't settle?
Yeah, it's hard to say, but there are some personalities that just refuse to cooperate with any system. They're not going to cooperate with the court system. They're not going to cooperate in a mediation system. They're just not going to cooperate because they, obstreperous or ornery or whatever you want to call it. So certain personalities, there's just nothing you can do about it. Time sometimes helps, sort of like as you do it for an hour or two, they get used to, okay, this is how this is going to go. And now I can really start getting serious about how I would like the case to look like settled versus what a jury might do with the case. So it all just depends. Every personality is different, and you just try to go into every room with an open eye and an open mind to, try to treat that person the way it's, the treatment's going to work out best to try to get the case resolved.
Gotcha. Do you think that mediation is, I would say this, do you think it's underutilized in legal field? Do you think it's overutilized in legal field? Do you think it's used exactly as much as it should be, in which cases? What's your feeling on mediation as a whole? Should it be used more than it's used now? Would it make more situations smoother and never even have legal issues? And do people have to go through an attorney to get mediation, or can they realize, you know what, we need a mediator, let's just go right to the mediator and get this done?
Yeah, a lot of your let's say your run-of-the-mill divorces where you don't really going to argue about the kids, you're not going to argue about real estate, you're not going to argue about money, you just kind of want, you get that car, I get this car, you see the kids on the weekends, I see them during the week, the sort of the basic generic divorces. A lot of those folks really could save a lot of money if they went to a mediator first, just to try to help come up with um, a shared idea of what a settlement might look like. And then one of the people can take that settlement to a lawyer's office and say, hey, we've settled this thing. Just drop the papers so that we can go uncontested. That's a lot less expensive process than, both sides getting lawyers and both sides fighting it out for a few months until the case gets resolved some other way. But the the folks that really use the mediation process in terms of they need it most of the time is court ordered, so there's no way you can get around it. Before you get a right to a jury trial in a lot of courts anyway, especially in Metro Atlanta, they say, well, you got a right to a jury trial, but you also are going to be mandated to go to mediation first. And because it settles so many cases, it works, so I feel like it works exactly like it's supposed to work. And sometimes the first mediation doesn't work, but the lawyers know really deep down that it's still going to settle. And so they might push for a last minute mediation too, So the lawyers really have a good idea of what kind of cases will settle and which ones aren't going to settle. And they use that, as they make their decisions advising their clients.
Gotcha. Gotcha. What do you think is one of the most common, I'd say, I guess, obstacles that prevents people when they come in from ever reaching or agreeing to mediation? And again, how do you address that?
It's probably just that, or what I mentioned earlier about the certain personality types. And, if you're going to be that kind of personality type, you might spend an hour or two with them, and then you're going to just have to call an impasse because, if they're never going to see the light in terms of just talking to you about the case, then, they're just not going to see the light.
Yeah. As an impartial, when you're in the middle of mediating something, how do you how do you address fairly the strengths and the weaknesses of each party's case? Like how do you make that distinction? Like I mean, everyone likes to think they could be fair. Everyone likes to think that they could be just, but I'm sure it's hard sometimes. And do you ever, and I don't want you to tip your cards in a way that would ever get you in trouble, but do you ever find yourself like you're just intrinsically like, I trust this person's story more, or I feel like this is the better way? Or do you really, you can just compartmentalize all of it, leave any of your feelings at the door and just enter into objective third party mode?
Yeah, I think you'd have to do that. Leave everything at the door, and you're going to listen to a side. And if it's compelling, you might agree with them. Yeah, that's compelling. But then you might have to tell them the other side too. Well, jury may look at it like this. A jury may say that's not compelling because of such and such. So you just always have to be willing to give the person who is trying to tell you their story or whatever it might be the other side of the coin, because with a jury, you just never, ever, ever know. And same with most, a judge. Judges are predictable to a degree, but you not every judge is going to be 100% predictable in what they're going to do in a divorce case, for example, you know.
Yeah. Is there any particular kind of case that's really difficult to mediate? You're like, oh no, not one of these.
Well, the higher the dollar amount usually just means it's going to be harder because, you know, both sides think it's a high dollar amount, but they just don't agree on what that high dollar amount is. And so all that just means is it's more time consuming, more tedious, more you got to work through, and you know, different mediators have different techniques to try to, you know, get people closer and that kind of thing.
Gotcha. Would you recommend more attorneys look into moving into doing mediation themselves, leaving law practice per se and becoming mediators? Or do you think there's enough mediators to go around? Do you guys have a backlog?
Well, it seems like there's enough mediators. I don't know for sure because I don't know. I think in some parts of the state, it probably is harder to get you know, decent mediators, and that's what I've heard. Just because, you know, we do cases all over the state, and so like if you're going to hire me to drive from Atlanta down to your 5 hours away location, you must not have very good mediators down there. So it'd be good to get more good mediators, and that all depends on really on the lawyer's personality. If you're good at being, you know, an open mind and listening to both sides and coming up with some advice for both parties, you know, then you probably make a great mediator.
You mentioned traveling like five hours or more, which I get that that's a thing. But in this post-COVID world, do you find it more common just to Zoom mediate? Have you done a lot of Zoom mediation? Is that where most of it is these days? Do you prefer Zoom mediation to being there in person? Is there a benefit to one or the other than cutting down travel time?
Yeah, I think most mediators would tell you that Zoom works great and there's no problem at all with Zoom, but it's better if you can be in person. I think that most mediators would tell you that. It just, there's something about it. I don't know what it is, but I think what's helped a lot of times for the folks that are out of town are going to be your insurance adjusters who are headquartered in Minnesota. They don't have to get on a plane every time they have to go to mediation. You know, they might be able to do one mediation in the morning in Minnesota and one in the afternoon, you know,
Yeah.
from their desktop. So I think that's what's really helped the system so that you don't have a lot of, you know, people on the peripheral side of the mediation, you know, insurance company adjusters and those kind of folks trying to, you know, make flights and catch a plane, but so they have to leave the mediation by 3 o'clock because the plane's leaving, you know.
Yeah. Um, so we live in a rapidly changing world. Everyone knows this. And, there's social media, there's AI, there's, magical black rectangles in everybody's pocket that are video cameras and connected to the internet and everything else. What have you noticed in your career that are the big shifts in the areas of law that you deal in? Like what trends have really shifted enormously since you started practicing? And what do you think is coming down the pipeline?
Well, I guess that what do you want to call it? The you may call it, you know, for social media. I don't know. You know, I'm not that much into social media, but
Mhm.
there is a tendency, and this is back when I was a judge, we would have people asked to come back and see the judge for something, and then have a video recorder in their pocket or a camera recording in their eyeglasses, you know.
Mhm.
There's just, you know, you never would think that somebody would do that. And then you see people in the courtroom, in the back of a courtroom, videotaping the proceedings, you know, which is not typically allowed unless you have permission from the judge, you know, before you record anything.
Yeah.
Uh, and so it's there's that need. I guess society feels like I didn't. If I can't show people what I went through, then they're not going to know what I went through today. You know.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's frustrating though because they're just, I don't know. Doesn't seem to be that necessity to me to have everything recorded.
And if I can't show people a picture of the food that I'm about to eat, did I even eat it?
Right, right. Yeah,
If
you
a
see.
tree falls in the woods and somebody didn't Instagram snap it, did it really fall? Well, Judge, I appreciate your time, and you've been very generous with the amount of info. I don't want to take up your whole day. So here in a minute, I'll probably give you my two closing questions. I'll give them to you now, and you can percolate on them while we jump over and take a look at your guys' site again. Question number one is just going to be: we go back in time, we meet a young non-judge, attorney Rich, fresh out of law school, and you're able to give him some advice. Maybe you got just a couple of sentences of advice you would give yourself, other than the obvious, which is of course buy a lot of Bitcoin, hold it till it crosses 100K, right? We all would go back and do that one. But what advice would you give yourself and why? And then question number two is, if I gave you my magical pen, and with this pen, you can change one law. You can strike a law from the books, you can edit a law that's on the books, or you can add a new law to the books. What law would you change? It could be a big law with national ramifications. It can be a little tiny law that is the thing that makes you fill out paperwork 5 times a week that you just hate filling out, or getting rid of parking tickets, or whatever it happens to be. While you're percolating on that, let's jump back over and take a look. Again, I am talking with Judge Randy Rich of Henning. And there you see right there, celebrating 25 plus years as the gold standard in dispute resolutions, Henning Mediation. If you want to get a hold of Judge Randy, Judge Rich, sorry, or anyone else at Henning, you can go to henningmediation.com or give them a call again at 770-955-2252. Really quickly, we're going to read from our last sponsor today, and that would be Rank with News. Is not being in the news regularly costing you, your firm, or your business credibility and visibility? Do you feel that getting found in Google search is more about dumb luck than science? What if there was a guaranteed way to get your law firm or your business featured in major national publications like Yahoo News, Forbes, Bloomberg, and others, and to see those articles ranking locally, nationally, sometimes in under 8 hours for major competitive keywords that people were actually looking for? Well, what else would you need to know? Rank with News is simply the most powerful way to hit page one in under 2 weeks, safely, organically, and oftentimes permanently. It's like guaranteed SEO or search engine optimization on steroids, ranking quickly and sticking long term. If you're tired of poor visibility for your business or your firm, visit rankwith.news to learn more and book a time to speak with a specialist about featuring your firm or your business in major national 8 and 9-figure traffic sites that can launch you to page one in a matter of hours and help you dominate your local marketplace. Get media exposure, rank higher in Google, build credibility, and win more customers and clients with rankwith.news. All right, so, Judge Randy, we travel back in time and somehow we haven't totally violated the space-time continuum, and you're able to go and just whisper a couple of quick words in young Randy Rich's ears. What advice would you give yourself at the beginning of your career?
Don't ever vote against Donald Trump. Don't ever take a bet against Donald Trump. I
So true story. I always put a stinger on the front end of these videos. It's a little tiny, 5 to 10 second clip of the video. I might have to put one of those Trumpisms in there because man, those are solid. I might do the zebra court, but oh, it's great. I love it. We'll see. I'll make no promises. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, it's like a lot of things, just being older, you realize that maybe the amount of time that you devoted to something, took away from time that you really wish you had spent with your family or whatever. And so that would be one of those kind of things, not just when I was in school, but, career stuff that, you wish you'd known, to spend more time rather with your family versus than your school or career or whatever. So it'd be something like that.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. I mean, that's good advice for anybody, really. There's a stop and smell the roses, carpe diem, right?
Yeah.
Don't let, and I think we're all guilty of that to some extent. You get focused on the unimportant things in life and you forget what really matters. So I think that's good advice. All right, so I gave you my magic pen. And this magic pen, again, can strike a law from the books, it can edit a law, or it can change a law. Now, there's only enough ink for one change. So you got to be careful with this. If I give you this pen, Judge, what are you going to change?
Well, I just love animals, and so I would probably write something that makes animal abuse laws a little bit stronger, something like that. I don't know how it would exactly be written, but I just animals are so they can't protect themselves, kind of thing, and they just need humans, to look after them, and so that'd probably be something like that.
All right. Well, we got a soft heart. There we go. Well, Judge, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me to my listeners today. I do always like to let my guest have the final word. Are there any parting words of wisdom or thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Oh, I can't think of anything. I appreciate your time. You're excellent interviewer, and I appreciate the opportunity of being on your show.
Well, thank you very much. This has been The Attorney Post. I've been talking with Judge Randy Rich of Henning Mediation down in the beautiful Georgia area. We will always have their information down below. Again, that is henningmediation.com. As always, this podcast, though we do talk about a lot of legal issues, does not constitute legal advice. And if you have a legal issue, you should always seek the advice of a competent attorney or mediator in your area who focuses on the matters that you need help with. However, I can say if you live anywhere in Georgia, I think that Judge Rich would be a wonderful resource for you. And again, you can reach him and the other mediators at henningmediation.com. They would be a great resource. Link down below in the description. This has been The Attorney Post. I am your host, as always, Justin West. If you are watching us on YouTube, we always appreciate a like, a subscribe, and a share. If you're on any other podcast repositories, we also appreciate you rating us or reviewing us on those platforms. It helps us grow the channel. But the number one thing you can do to help us is to help other people. If you know somebody that would benefit from the information found in this particular episode, share it with them. Because, as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. And that goes for them too. Until next time, thank you guys for watching, and we'll catch you on the flip side. Bye-bye.